Good afternoon, and welcome to the MIT Alumni Career Lunch and Learn webinar series. My name is Ellen Stahl, and I run the MIT Alumni Career Programs here at the Alumni Association, and will serve as host and moderator for today's workshop. Before we get started, it is my pleasure to introduce you to our presenter today. We are extremely fortunate to have with us Anne Guo. Anne is an alumna of MIT, graduating with her bachelor's in Course 6 in 1998 and her MEng in 1999. She is a career executive coach who specializes in helping high achievers blast through career roadblocks and reach a sustained state of flow. No stranger to career transitions herself, she has gone through artificial intelligence research, software product management, entrepreneurship, and executive recruiting to arrive at her current profession as coach. In addition to coaching clients one-on-one, she is the founder of 2 career-related startups. With her newest startup, Passion Analytics, she is developing an automated online career coach that integrates deep career expertise with advanced analytics in order to help people at scale. Anne, welcome, and thank you for sharing your expertise with us today. I hand it over to you.
Thanks, Ellen. Very excited to be here today, and I'll dive right in. The topic talk today is how to design the perfect career fit. And in order to understand how to design the perfect career, we want to first understand what are the real barriers to achieving that goal. So according to the most recent Gallup poll, roughly 7 out of 10 workers don't feel engaged in their jobs. And as you can see on the chart, the most educated workers are the least engaged. So the question is, why are so many smart people unable to find fulfilling careers? And to answer this question, I want to first share with you an experiment conducted by psychologist Martin Seligman back in 1976. He took 2 groups of dogs, and my apologies in advance to dog lovers in the audience. In the first group, a dog was put into a cage and given some electric shocks at random. And there was a lever in the cage, and if he pushes on it, he can get out. The dog quickly learned to push on the lever and escape the shocks. In the second group, same setup, except there's no lever to press. They were given shocks, but they were trapped. There's nothing they could do. And after this initial phase, the experimenter then took the 2 groups of dogs and put them into bins. So the first group of dogs, when they were shocked, they quickly jumped out like normal dogs would. But the interesting happened when they took the second group of dogs and put them into a bin. And even though these bins were the obviously shallow thing they could escape from, they didn't. The dogs just stood there and endured the shocks. The dog in group 2 had learned that it's helpless in avoiding shocks, so it gave up trying even in situations that it can control. This phenomenon is called learned helplessness. Now, this may give some clues to why there's so many people suffering silently in this pandemic of job malaise. When I hear stories of what my clients have gone through, it's actually quite heroic, the amount of pain they've endured at ill-fitting jobs. And these include weight gain, weight loss, hair loss, teeth grinding during sleep, sleepwalking, insomnia, anxiety attacks, and depression. And just like the dogs in group 2, over time, they've learned there's nothing they can do to make things better. And after a while, many of them gives up. So you may ask at this point, okay, I get it. If I don't get good career results after I try a bunch of things, then I may get into this learned helplessness state and believe there's nothing I can do. But why didn't the things I try work in the first place? I'm smart. I tried a good number of things. Why are so many smart people unable to find fulfilling careers? Well, here are 3 reasons why it's so hard to find a perfect career fit. And all of the reasons point to the fact that career design is a much more complicated problem than we give it credit for. The first reason why it's so hard to find a perfect career fit is that the space of careers has become very complex, especially over the last 30 years with globalization and technological advances. And jobs are becoming increasingly specialized. So just think about all the fields related to computers alone. There's computer networks, computer engineering, graphics, big data, user interface design, security, IT. It goes on and on. Now, in contrast, back in the 1960s, there were probably only a handful of computer-related jobs, right? So not only there's been a huge explosion in the subfields, there's also been an increasing number of ways to work between telecommuting, job sharing, solopreneurship, side gigs, especially with the rise of Uber, Airbnb, and freelance matching websites. 45 million Americans, or 22% of the adult population, have offered services on a gig platform as we shift to this on-demand economy. So these two dimensions together create a really large space of career choices, which can be overwhelming to navigate. But not only that, industries and fields are changing faster than ever before due to what we mentioned, globalization and technology. The future is much less predictable when making a career decision. For instance, when you're thinking about whether or not to go back to school to get that degree and invest all that time, money, energy, it's a much tougher call these days because you know that the industry demands can change while you're in school, and the new skill set you gain might become obsolete in a few years. So in summary, the sheer vastness of the job space plus the uncertainty together create a lot of complexity. Secondly, even though there's been an explosion of complexity in the career space, we're still going about making career decisions in much the same way our parents did. So we lack new concepts and framework to handle this explosion of complexity. Here's an analogy, right? So take a guy from the year 1800, and let's say he's a smart guy, top 1% in population. And you stop him at the side of the road, and you say, "Hey, Giuseppe, I hear you're a smart guy. Please fix my car for me." Maybe it's got a dead battery. Maybe the engine temperature sensor is malfunctioning. Obviously the poor guy has no hope of ever fixing your car because he doesn't have the faintest idea about what these basic concepts are. If by some miracle he figure out how to pop open the hood, all he can do is probably just jiggle a few wires and then maybe later kick the tire a few times. And this is equivalent of what most people do when they're making career moves. What are these things, So no wonder they didn't get good results. Even if they do make a move and get a new job, if it's not well thought out, it may very well go bad after a few months. And then they're back to where they started, but even more discouraged, right? And then after a few tries to, no better solution, like the dogs in group 2, they get stuck in that learned helplessness state and then give up. And so here's the third reason why it's so hard to find the perfect career fit. Not only are we lacking theoretical frameworks, the practical execution part of making a career change is also very challenging. Revamping your career midlife can sometimes feel like an impossible task. Maybe you have a full-time job plus family responsibility. Even if you don't have a family, you have a lot of dates you have to go on, right? So you simply can't afford to put everything on pause and go into the mountains and meditate and figure out what will fulfill you. It's almost as if you need to change the engine of your car while you're speeding along the highway, and you have to make a complete update in real time. So what to do in this case? Now let me illustrate the analogical way to solve this problem. So imagine that there's a large flatbed truck that slides in the lane smoothly in front of you and extends its ramp down so you can drive aboard. And the resident Formula One pit crew descends on your car and give you a total engine upgrade. And all the while, the truck is speeding along so you didn't lose any ground. Well, this sounds great. You say, well, what's the catch? Well, you have to first build the infrastructure so you can execute flawlessly when you find yourself in a career pinch. Right? So that's the catch. Not only do you need good theoretical framework, you also need an infrastructure for smart execution. So now we've gone over the 3 reasons why it's so hard to find the perfect career fit, and I hope you've gained a better appreciation for this problem. I feel like I can almost hear some of you go like, that's why I haven't been able to figure it out. So in part 2, let's dive into the how-tos of designing the perfect career, and it's a large topic to cover. In fact, I'll be teaching a 3-month online course on the topic. In the next half an hour or 40 minutes, though, I'll cover the main framework and as many of the concepts as I can, because using the right framework, it will help you tame the complexity of this problem. So let's dive right in. So first, I want to share with you the overall framework I've developed for career design. So we can pose the problem of finding the perfect career fit as a search problem, right? So on one end, there's you. On the other end, there's a space of all careers. So the search problem we pose is, how do we efficiently search through the space of careers in order to identify your ideal career? Now, I want to add that this framework is not limited to career search. Once you narrow down your career, you can use this framework to conduct your job search. And once you're at a job, you can use it to narrow down the list of projects you want to pursue. And even if you're retired, you can use this to narrow down the list of opportunities that will be most fulfilling for you. So this is a high-level view, and we illustrate the process and sequencing of the actions in the career design, and we'll dive into the individual pieces. Now, you may wonder, well, where do I start, right? Top-down or bottom-up? If we start bottom-up by looking at individual jobs or careers, then on one extreme, right, we can do a brute force search by looking at every single career under the sun. There's actually a comprehensive taxonomy published by the Bureau of Labor Statistics. You can look through every single career there. This will be pretty time-consuming. Now, on the other extreme, you can start with too few careers, and this is typically what happens in senior year in college, right? You look at a set of jobs that someone with your degree generally get. You go to the career fair, apply to a few of them, and you take the best offer. Now, this could work, and if you're happy where you end up, that's great. But what if you're not happy with the fit? And there's that nagging doubt, maybe you didn't look through enough options. Well, one way to generate some solid options is to start with a top-down approach first. Now, here's the top-down approach. We start from ourselves, again. Through self-inquiry and doing exercises, we get a better picture of ourselves and what we really want. I'll show you a sample exercise later just to illustrate what I mean. Essentially, what we're doing is building a model of ourselves, and you can think of this as a specification, right? The specification sort of falls out of the self-model afterwards. For example, back in grad school, my initial spec was the set of 4 things. I'm extroverted, I have a computer science degree, I enjoy intellectual stimulation, and I'm a doer who likes to make things happen. Now you have a spec, then you can take the spec and ask around, right? Talk to other people and see what type of jobs might fit. The spec or self-model essentially shines spotlights on the space of all jobs. Now, one of the jobs highlighted by my self-model is entrepreneur. Now, here's the full list. But we're not quite done with the top-down approach yet because we neglected an important shortcut. This is true especially if you're in school or relatively early in your career, right? You haven't had that much experience yet, but oftentimes you're forced to make career choices based on this scant experience, and your self-model is already vague and uncertain. In this case, you can bootstrap some job suggestions from other people's experiences through career testing. And I want to stress that career testing is not just for young people with no experience. If you are experiencing a lot of misfit with your career and have this feeling that maybe I got into the totally wrong place to start with, career testing is a really good place to start. Now, career testing generally try to see what type of careers people similar to you have enjoyed. So that's a nice shortcut. And when I did some testing, human resources manager and psychologist were some of the careers that popped up. And here's the full list. As you can see, lots of jobs in psychology, and interestingly enough, career counselor was on it. But unfortunately, at the time, I wasn't ready to be a career counselor. So I'll tell you more about my path. So here's the combined list from both the career testing and investigating my self-model, right? And here I crammed them all in this diagram on the bottom here in the space of jobs now that we've narrowed down to. Now the next step is to conduct some research and experiments on these actual jobs. So first we'll talk about just research. I narrowed down the list to this 4 by doing some online research and information interviews. Not all of it was very well thought out, made tons of mistakes. For example, I had crossed out HR manager right away, because the only image of HR I had at the time is, of Toby in the TV show The Office, right? And let's just say I did not identify. But funnily enough, a few years later, when I was offered a recruiting manager position in the HR department, I remember the HR result from my test, which made me more open to that possibility. Eventually, I accepted the offer and led to a really good career. Now, the psychology result from the career testing really hit home for me. I actually had briefly considered dropping out of the PhD program in artificial intelligence and enroll in a psych program instead. But that will be a pretty big move, right? Years and years more of grad school, just the last thing I wanted. So I decided to launch an experiment to test out the hypothesis first. I became a volunteer counselor at the local jail and got training to counsel prison inmates. I still remember on the first day when the guards stepped out of the room, I was really nervous. But soon enough, I felt comfortable with my inmate almost as much as I did with my students that I TA'd in college. It was a really awesome experience, and ended up doing it for about a year and a half. On the career side, though, I quickly learned that while doing counseling work as a volunteer on Sundays is great, I would get burned out if that was my full-time job, because I had a hard time emotionally separating myself from the challenges my inmates were going through, and there were a lot of challenges. So that's one experiment I launched, right? And besides that, I also launched experiment TAing classes. And, I TA'd several classes, actually, in grad school to test out the teaching professor idea. And also I launched and oversaw several undergrad research projects to test out a career as a research professor. And finally, I launched a lotion-making business to try out entrepreneurship. I made my own lotions and creams, and this was a kind of a hobby I had on the side anyways, and created educational material to teach other people how to make it. I actually had a business plan. It was all pretty serious. So now each of these experiments allow me to both learn something about the job and to learn something about myself, thereby augmenting my understanding of the career space and also my self model, right? So here is the self model and updated. So from TAing classes, I learned that while I love teaching, I'm not passionate enough about computer science to want to teach it for the rest of my life. And also, one of my favorite components of teaching was the advising component. When students lingered on after office hours and asked me, like, oh, what job should I think about applying for, right? Or what internship, or maybe what classes should I take next semester? I really enjoyed the advising component. And from running my lotion-making business, I realized that I really enjoyed entrepreneurship. And although the other thing I learned is that I needed a topic that I care more deeply about than making lotion, right? Because it's tough to make a business work, and it can be really hard to push through the tough times unless you really believed in what you were doing. So now that we have a better self-model, it in turn informs and constrains the space of jobs we're searching in and shines spotlights on different set of jobs. So I crossed out psychologist, also crossed out research and teaching professor, kept entrepreneur, then added back in career counselor. So after I finished my PhD, I launched a career startup called My Career Tube, a career video site, and I became a career tech entrepreneur. So that's the first iteration. So now I've taken you through one complete iteration of the process, first going top down and then bottom up. Right? So now for the startup, after running it for a while, I learned that it just didn't match my risk tolerance at the time. Coming out of grad school, I had over $100K of student loan debt, and things quickly got really stressful as I was running it and not really getting much revenue back, or profits for that matter. So I moved to software product management. So I started this job in September, I think it was September 14, 15 of 2008, and got laid off less than 2 months later due to a company reorg in response to the stock market crash. That was my first job out of school, right? I was also 8 months pregnant at the time. For that, the day I got laid off, I was devastated. I then had to build my career in a deep recession with a new baby. And in the years following, I went through online marketing manager, recruiting manager, executive search, running my independent recruiting firm, to finally career coach and back to career tech entrepreneur. And I experimented a lot and iterated quickly So even though I've had my share of bad luck and made tons of mistakes throughout, because I had a tight process, I was able to achieve financial independence while I was still in my 30s, and most importantly, I was able to arrive at an awesome career where I love what I do, right? And also had some fun getting there. So in summary, for this process, we start from top down, and then we construct a model of ourselves, and this model spotlights jobs to consider, and then we do research on them and conduct experiments, and we keep iterating. And in each iteration, our self-knowledge becomes increasingly refined, right? So the self-model should get bigger and bigger and more refined as we do this. And the self-knowledge then can help us filter and narrow down our job hypothesis set. So the set should get smaller for the most part. It can expand occasionally, but get smaller. And I want to point out, I said this as a search process, but we can also create jobs in the job set, right? So I was like a career tech entrepreneur is something I created. So you can definitely create your own career or job and then put into that set. So now in this iterative process, I want to, you can keep track of these 4 things so that it allows you to make explicit trade-offs and build on your findings, right? And these are the important components of your career infrastructure. So the first thing is your self-model. These are everything you ever wanted, needed, dreamed of, your edge, what are you good at, your purpose, etc. So the second thing is your current job set. These are the jobs you're wondering about, and they may have some promise. And this set, again, changes over time as you investigate. The third thing is your list of career questions. And the fourth thing is experiments that you launched to test out careers in the current set. I can't stress enough how important this part is, just writing it all down. I'm always appalled and amazed at how little notes people take around their career planning. It will be just like, writing code in your head, right, if you don't do that. Sure, maybe you're talented and you can write snippets of code in your head, but no one I know can write and debug 10,000 lines of code in their head. Yet that's what you're doing if you don't take notes on your career, because what you're doing is you're hoping to resolve all these complex dependencies in your head, and that's why it doesn't work. So throughout this process, you should be asking yourself, am I putting all the questions on my list, right? Am I answering these questions? Am I launching and monitoring my experiments, right? As a rule of thumb, always have at least one experiment going in the background. And we'll talk a little bit more about experiments in a bit. So first, regarding the self-model, how do you construct this self-model, right? So there are tons of exercises, inquiry that I do with clients one-on-one, and usually over a period of several weeks. It's a lot of work, but it's also a lot of fun. So here's one exercise I'd like to share with you. So I call it the 7 Subpersonality Exercise, where you're trying to find a set of 7 or fewer subpersonalities that together form a spanning set of you. So if you ever had a tough career decision to make and found yourself saying, well, part of me wants this, but part of me wants this other thing, then I think you know what I mean here. So rather than thinking of ourselves as monolithic personalities, for decision-making purposes, it can be more helpful to think of ourselves as a cast of characters. The challenge then is to find the smallest set of personalities that are mostly orthogonal to one another, and in combination, maximally captures your complexity, right? So I had first came upon a version of this exercise on Steve Pavlina's blog, Personal Development for Smart People, and adapted for career planning purposes. So here's my spanning set. A quick note, these should be themes that are pretty persistent throughout your life and manifest themselves in different areas in your life, right? In work, in play, in relationships. Now, looking back, you might be able to see traces of them as early as childhood. Now, looking at this list, a lot of things I engage in traces back to one or a combination of these subpersonalities. For example, when I was in grad school doing academic research in AI, the dominant personalities were number 1, the student, and the number 2, the go-getter, right? Together, they were a powerful combo that silenced most of the other personalities. My number 3, connector, was very frustrated because doing academic research was very lonely and isolating, So what happened is I oscillated between having my mind blown by these cool concepts in AI and feeling lonely and down because I was spending too much time by myself. And that's what happens when your subpersonalities are not working in sync with one another, right? You have this oscillation in energy level, and eventually it can feel pretty draining. So here are a couple of tips when it comes to finding your subpersonalities. As a rule of thumb, keep it between 4 and 7. Right? If you have too few, it may not capture enough of your richness, and too many, they stop being helpful as a decision-making tool. Right? Then you're just sort of juggling all these things. So also give them expressive names that really capture the feeling. At first, I named the indulgent part of myself a hedonist, but it didn't feel right because the word had too much negative connotation. Right? So when I finally came upon the Roman, which is number 5 here, it was perfect. So I picture this Roman reclining on the chaise lounge eating grapes, right? And it really captured the essence of what I want to express. And I found that in my stressful corporate jobs later, when I also had a young kid to raise, the Roman was kicked to the curb, right? There was no time to indulge or to relax. And as I said before, when one or more of your subpersonalities are suppressed for too long, it becomes really hard to achieve your goals. Because what happens is that these subpersonalities start to sabotage us to gain some attention and control, right? It just try to grab control. And the reason to make all of these personalities explicit is so that you can negotiate and create more win-win situations. So for example, the go-getter might be working hard, right, to create a career talk, but if I can swing it, I can deliver it at a conference in Italy, right? So the Roman will be happy too. So if you're listening, invite me to a talk in Italy and I'll come. Oh, seriously though, I really recommend you try this exercise when you get a chance. And if you do, feel free to send me your results. So here are some common career issues, and we can take a look at them in light of our new framework, right? So when there seem to be too many options out there and you don't know what you want, you probably have an under-constrained self-model. Your model of yourself is really underdeveloped. In this case, just do lots of self-inquiries and exercises, like the one I showed you before. Now, the second case is tougher. So the second common problem is there are no options, right? Some of you might already anticipate this as I was talking about constructing your self-model. So you say, Anne, it's all well and good that I learn a lot about myself, but the more I learn about myself and more of what I want, the pickier I get, right? And the harder it is to find something that fits everything. Doesn't that make my job search harder, not easier? Well, I think you're right in some respects, but, I'll talk more about that. So funnily enough, though, most people experience both of these problems simultaneously. They both under-constrain themselves and over-constrain themselves. So usually they tend to first under-constrain themselves and then over-constrain themselves. And, as a result, they feel like there are too many choices and at the same time, nothing works. Well, how can that be the case? Here's an example. Take a person that says, okay, I want a job that pays really well. And immediately that person jumps to, well, law and finance are lucrative fields. And then he thinks, all right, well, now I don't enjoy tons of reading that lawyers are required to do, so I probably won't do well in law school. And also, I'm not really good at modeling, so finance is out. Now, I think I'm simplifying a bit here, but that's the process many, many people go through. And then they end up stuck, right? Because they never really expand their options in the first place. The right way to go about this is to first really understand what you want the money to begin with, right? To see if there's a need that's more core and deeper that could be satisfied differently. If so, great. If not, it's time to investigate all the jobs that pay well, right? And then look at our abilities, our edge, our personality, our wants and needs to determine what's a good set of job options, right? Doing that highlighting in the job set as I showed you before. So then invest all these options, do your research, then launch a few experiments, then learn and repeat. So going back to that over-constrained self-model part, this is a tough one. I want to spend another minute on this. So, over time, invariably, as you get better self-knowledge, your model is going to get bigger and bigger, right? How do you deal with conflict? So now we touched on it briefly when we talked about the subpersonality exercise, right, to deal with conflict and things you want. Also, the thing to do is to zoom in and figure out what your core wants and needs are and be unrelentingly committed to those. So, for example, here are my 2 core commitments to myself. Number 1 is that I will never work in a capacity where I feel lonely on a daily basis, because deep connection is very important to me. I remember feeling, really lonely when I was in grad school, when I had to spend tons of time thinking and coding on my own. Dysfunctional corporate environments can make me feel really lonely as well. Also, when I was in a great corporate environment with really cool coworkers, the sheer amount of work can cause, just a lot of stress, so that all the cool coworkers don't really have time to hang out together. And that, again, felt kind of lonely. And for me, this is not acceptable, and I'm 100% committed to feel a sense of connection in the work I do. And which is why career coaching is perfect, because I get to experience a deep sense of connection on a daily basis when I coach clients. Now, my second commitment to myself is that it's more of a personal quirk. And I talk about here just to illustrate the range of things you can be unrelentingly committed to, right? No matter how silly or trivial it may seem at the time. So this one is, I'm pretty sensitive to the layout of my physical environment. When I'm in a restaurant, for example, I'm the person that always want to sit with my back against the wall facing into the room. And when I'm working, it's the same way. If there's a wall in front of me that's within 15 feet, I feel really restless and I'm less productive. And now forget cubicles, right? That's just terrible for me. So knowing this quirk about myself, I'm 100% committed not to be in a situation where I have no control over where I sit. And I remember back in one of my corporate jobs, I would go sit in the company cafeteria with my laptop. And my coworkers later told me, they were wondering if I didn't like them. And this is one reason why I work for myself, because then, I feel like, I'm adult. I can pick where I sit every day. So while I'm 100% committed to these 2 core things, over the years, I've also shed some non-core wants and needs that kept making me miserable. So that's the second way to get what you want, right? It's to shed these non-core wants and needs. And one of them is that for a long time, I felt the need to prove myself by excelling in math and science. And it's probably from a complex of, having an older brother who's good at this stuff, and maybe also part cultural. And the problem is, though, the better I got at math and science, the more competitive the environment I got myself into, so that I had to work harder and be more heads down and solo and lonely, so that over time, after banging my head against the wall many times, I finally decided this want just doesn't serve me, and I worked pretty hard to shed it. And I'm mostly there, not 100% yet. So the third way to get what you want is to improve your ability to get the things you want. And now, this is the thing that smart, capable people jump straight to, right? When they want something, they take classes or do whatever it takes to get good at getting the things you want. But don't forget number 1 and number 2, which are also pretty key. And so we'll talk about number 3 here, and this is related to my next point. Career design doesn't always have to involve career change. So coming back here, a common complaint is that there's not many great opportunities, right? So if you feel this at times, then I would say chances are you did not create an opportunity feed, or you didn't, experiment enough. And here's a short case study of an alum, John Gavinonis from class of 98, who was a chemistry major. And I use this example also to illustrate, besides illustrating a case study of an experiment, is to illustrate that career design doesn't always have to involve career change. So John is currently a manager of R&D at DuPont, the chemical giant based in Delaware. So while he enjoys his job in leadership position at DuPont, John has an interest in public policy. So if he wanted to, one route to satisfy that interest is to apply for a very competitive public policy fellowship. You would be competing with tens of thousands of applicants for, a number of spots for the opportunity to work on the Hill for a year alongside of a lawmaker. And to do this, John will have to take a large pay cut and jump out of the leadership track. So, and it just so happens that he enjoys his current job and being in the position of leadership. So what to do at this point, right? Can John have his cake and eat it too? Well, yes. He created the MIT Legislative Advocacy Network. It's a joint effort between the MIT Alumni Association and the DC office. It informs and empowers alumni on legislative issues that impact science policy and education. So if you sign up through your Infinite Connection account, you get an email on average, 4 times a year when legislative matters affecting science policy and education are being debated in Congress. And then they will send you some material to prepare you to email your local congressman. And that's it. Here, I want to make a plug for Lane for those in the audience who care about public policy issues. You can sign up through your Infinite Connection account. So here, John has designed a great experiment that created many win-win situations, right? And let's just look at these win-wins. By creating Lane, he gets to carry out his interest and test drive it. So John has met at this point several U.S. senators and been consulted on science policy issues. He gets to build his professional network. Number 3, by signaling his interest and be plugged into a bigger network, he has created an opportunity feed where if relevant positions in science policy ever comes up, he'll be tapped, right? So rather than starting from the bottom as an intern or a junior fellow, I won't be surprised if he gets a high-level federal appointment at some point. Number 4, he also gets to strengthen his position at his current job, by developing a large network of contacts, including these U.S. senators. He makes himself more attractive to his current employer, right? And as well as all these learning opportunities from knowing all these new people. Number 5, creating a new program to connect alums to the Institute also fulfills his volunteer commitments, sitting on the MIT Alumni Association board. And finally, he gets to make an impact on actual legislation and make a contribution in what he cares about. I want to emphasize here that a good experiment can serve the dual purpose of information gathering and also building your opportunity feed. So I just want to say that again. A good experiment can serve the dual purpose of information gathering and building your opportunity feed, right? So, and John's current goal is to sit on some boards of early-stage biotech startups, and feel free to contact him with opportunities. You see how that works here? So when I coach clients, one way I think about my role is to help people transform their career search space such that when they're navigating in this space, the downside risk is minimized, right? So there's a lot of risk control there so that the valleys are more filled in so you don't fall as far down. At the same time, the opportunities on the upside are amped up so that you're experiencing more fulfillment and satisfaction by doing things that are a better fit. And I also want to stress here, remember that a better career fit doesn't always have to be a new job, right? Just remember John's example. Remember this picture from a while back, the beginning of the talk about the complexity of the career space and the vastness of choices? Well, armed with a better framework, you can now make the vastness of the choices work for you, right? Because in much of human history, what we do was completely dictated by the station we were born in. You had little choice if you were born in a low caste in 1400s in India or even a woman in the 1950s United States. So now with all the different job choices and all the different ways we can do them, your chances are better than ever to find that little perfect niche, right, that matches you perfectly. And to deal with all the uncertainty in the job space, that's why we iterate quickly, right? This is starting to. So unlike the men from 1800, right, who doesn't know what electricity is, all the quote-unquote advanced career concepts here are things you already know. You just need to map these concepts from the world of science and engineering to the career domain. And, because if you have a Twitter account or you have a Twitter feed or a Facebook feed, it's simple to understand what an opportunity feed is, right? So I like to think that the complexity of fixing your career is similar to that of fixing a car. It's not easy, and it doesn't come naturally for most people, but it definitely takes some learning and training. But most people can make pretty good progress if given good instructions and if they apply themselves. Career design and career planning, it's really worth investing in because it's a lifelong skill, right? You'll be using to guide your career. Even after you retire, you can still use this framework to help you figure out projects you want to pursue that bring you maximum satisfaction and fulfillment. Now, the top-down approach we talked about, well, what was that, right? So it's really an exciting process of self-discovery where you get to learn about valuable things about yourself and learn what's core to you, and also learn to take a stand and really honoring that core by making an unwavering commitment to it. Now, bottom-up approach, where you're exploring the space of careers, when done right, it should have the excitement of a road trip. As a coach, in the short term, I'd be happy to be your pit crew when you need me. But for the long run, though, I like to teach you the framework and concepts so you can fix the car yourself in case you run into problems on this journey.
I'm launching a 3-month online course on career design that will go much more in depth on some of the topics we touched on today. The 7 Subpersonality Exercise is just one of many that will take you through to build a solid self-model. From my experience coaching hundreds of people, I'd say the average person's self-model only covers 10 to 20% of their possible career self-knowledge. Just to drive that home, among my coaching clients, there are actually a number of psychologists and other coaches, people who are highly trained to build models of themselves and others, and even they have glaring gaps when it comes to their careers. After I help you construct a better self-model, we'll dive into finding great opportunities that match you at the very core. I'll show you a number of different approaches for constructing an opportunity feed so you can funnel the best opportunities to yourself. The great thing about this process is that it will not only help you discover opportunities, it will also help you land them. Because when you can articulate and demonstrate why an opportunity makes total sense for you, you'll be much more persuasive. You'll be much more persuasive during job interviews and other types of evaluative situations. The class starts on Tuesday, June 7th. They will be held on Tuesday evenings from 7:30 to 9 p.m. Eastern Time for a total of 8 live sessions. There will be 1 class per week in the month of June. In July and August, we'll have sessions every other week. This gives you extra time between classes to research and implement the methods we learned in class. Class sessions will be recorded and stored online, so if you can't attend a couple of classes live, you won't miss out. There'll be a Q&A session at the end of each class. I'll also be scheduling several additional office hours so you can have more chances to ask questions as the course progresses. Finally, as a bonus, you'll get a number of effective email contact scripts that can help you maximize your chance of getting in front of important decision makers. Click on the button below to find out more and to register. Hope to see you in class.